Gentlemen, welcome, and this is the August 23rd Board of Adjustment for the City of Tarpon Springs, and I want to call this meeting to order, 6:30 p.m. And now I'd like to ask Ms. Tillison if she would call roll.
Ms. Rich,
Present.
Mr. Herboski,
Here.
Ms. Simon,
Here.
Mr. Grossman,
Here.
Mr. Wood.
Here.
Thank you. I want to make note of a change to the agenda tonight. Application number 22-44 has been withdrawn by the applicant, so will not be heard tonight. And now, if I could call upon our attorney to explain the quasi-judicial process and procedures and read the quasi-judicial announcement for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The matters before the City of Tarpon Springs Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. In a quasi-judicial proceeding, the board's function is to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the City of Tarpon Springs Code of Ordinances. This is a legal decision regarding the application before the board. The board may only consider evidence that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues arising from the application and the applicable code sections. If the evidence demonstrates that the applicant meets the criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances, then the board is required by law to approve the application. If the evidence demonstrates that the applicant does not meet the criteria contained in the code, then the board is required to deny the application. Any and all persons providing testimony at this hearing are required to do so under oath. All persons testifying at this hearing must give their name, address, and must indicate whether or not they have been sworn for the record prior to proceeding with their testimony. All testimony and questioning at this hearing must address matters that are relevant and material to the issues under consideration based on the city's Code of Ordinances. Any board members who have disclosures such as ex parte communications or conflicts of interest, please make your disclosures at the beginning of the hearing to which they pertain. The following is the established procedure which will be followed at this quasi-judicial proceeding. First, city staff will present its testimony and evidence regarding the application. The applicant will have an opportunity to ask questions and cross-examine the city staff and any city witnesses. The applicant will then have the opportunity to present his or her witnesses and evidence. The city will have the opportunity to cross-examine the applicant and any of the applicant's witnesses. Members of the public opposing the application and members of the public in support of the application will be given the opportunity to present their testimony and evidence, and then the applicant and the city may present any rebuttal testimony and evidence in a closing statement for summary. Then the board will close the public hearing for consideration. At this time, anyone who's going to speak at this hearing, please stand to receive the oath. All right, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth on the matters here before the City of Tarpon Springs Board of Adjustment this evening? I do. Okay. Don't forget when you approach the microphone to state your name, address, and indicate that you've been sworn.
Thank you. First tonight, we have before us application number 23-78. This is a request to waive the requirement to construct a sidewalk along the abutting improved street, location being 130 Rainville Road. And just note, this is one of those cases, sidewalk that does have some different criteria than we normally see for many of our other applications. So if anybody has any questions at any time for staff or attorney related to these, please forward them at the appropriate time. Okay, I call upon the staff to do their presentation.
Okay, Allie Keene, Senior Planner with the Planning and Zoning Department. The subject property is located here outlined in yellow. It's at Rainville Road and North Pinellas Avenue. The property is zoned IR, which is industrial restricted. There is some residential office zoning to the south. Further to the west of the site is a mixture of public, semi-public, as well as industrial zoning districts. And this property also has some unincorporated property surrounding it, which is anything that isn't shaded in color. And that's a mixture of industrial uses as well as residential uses. The Land Development Code states that the construction of sidewalks along abutting street frontages are a required improvement with any new development. The code also allows applicants to request a sidewalk waiver, and it gives the Board of Adjustment the authority to grant that waiver. The applicant is in the process of developing the property as an RV and boat storage facility, and at this time, they are requesting a sidewalk waiver to grant relief from constructing sidewalks along the Rainville Road street frontage. This is a look at the approved site plan for the project, the property outlined in yellow here, and the sidewalk location shown in teal along Rainville Road. A little bit of history about the project. The site plan was originally approved back in July of 2020 under resolution number 2020-42. The site plans were prepared by a licensed professional engineer, and they did include the required sidewalk in the site plans. The sidewalk was 5 feet in width, and it did include a boardwalk segment that went over some wetlands that are on the property, and I'll show you a closer up image here in just a minute. In August of 2021, the site work permit was issued under permit number 21-502 to allow the applicant to begin construction of the RV and boat storage facility. Those plans that were approved also include the sidewalk in question today. This is zooming into the Rainville Road frontage. The sidewalk is shown entirely on the private property. That is primarily due to there's an existing drainage swale along Rainville Road here. The sidewalk again includes a 5-foot wide portion in blue here, and then the portion that goes over the wetland area and the wetland mitigation area is shaded in green, and that is a boardwalk segment design. The Land Development Code states that a sidewalk waiver can only be granted if one or more of the criteria shown here on the screen are met. Those include the existing right-of-way is of insufficient width, the existing right-of-way is unimproved or not paved. It states that it would be technically impractical because of the existing conditions to construct the sidewalk. And the last thing it states is that the board cannot consider the non-presence of other sidewalks in the area as a means to grant a waiver. In this case, staff does note that there are limitations on the property due to the drainage swale as well as the wetlands that make construction more difficult. So that kind of touches on criteria 1 and 3, but we do go back to that they did receive site plan approval that was ultimately approved by the Board of Commissioners, showing that there was a feasible design. This is an aerial image of the subject property over here. This is just showing the location of the drainage swale, and the wetlands kind of wrap around the Pinellas Ave frontage. This is a street view image showing that drainage swale. This is the intersection of Pinellas Ave and Rainville Road. This is just looking the other direction along the property's frontage. And the last thing I'll touch on is the context. This area, staff refers to it as the north of the Anclote River. Currently, there are no sidewalks anywhere within the immediate area. The land uses really are kind of a mixed grab bag. There's residential, industrial, there's the traditional water-dependent uses along the river frontage, and therefore staff has really identified this area as an area of transition and really needs a special planning effort to help manage future growth north of the Anclote River to help with the transition and integration of all these various uses. It's important to note that as properties develop and redevelopment in this area, sidewalks are a required improvement for any project. And with a special planning effort going into potentially into play, it is likely that a future sidewalk network will exist in the area in the future. These are the 2 additional criteria for you to consider for a sidewalk waiver. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Chair. I have a question that might be best answered by a legal.
Okay.
Can we simply make a motion that we will grant them the waiver if they will pay into the sidewalk fund?
That is not what the code provides for. The code, the way that it's been presented, unless I'm missing something, the way that the code reads is that if they meet that criteria, they get it regardless of whether or not they're going to pay into that. If that was something that was in the legislation that was existing, then yes, you could do that, but you can't impose that as a condition.
Complicates things, thank you.
Okay, does any other of the board have any questions for staff?
I do have just a couple quick questions. My standard ones, your credentials are on file with the city, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you're entering the city's file in this matter for evidence for the board's consideration, correct?
Yes.
The other question I have is actually about the drainage swale. That particular drainage swale, is it just along this particular property, or does that drainage swale extend down Rainville Road across other properties?
I would have to go back and look at the aerial photograph. I do believe, I don't know if I have a picture of the other side of the road. I am not, the applicant may be able to provide some more information on that. I can look at some images to answer that question here in a minute, but I believe that it's not as, not as defined as you go further west along Rainville Road. And I don't recall if there is a significant of a drainage swale on the south side of the road, but I can look at that.
Is that a city-owned easement for where that do you know if that's a city-owned easement where the drainage swale is, or if it's just?
I'd have to look to see if Rainville Road is a county road or city. I believe it might be a county right-of-way.
So that may be a county-maintained drainage swale?
Yes, potentially, and I'll verify that as well.
Okay.
So can you explain why the county versus city-owned swale is an issue?
Because if it was city-owned property, there's the potential that the city could go in later and do that. And also a question of who's maintaining that particular section of the property in perpetuity, whether it's the city, whether it's the county, whether it's the property owner. You can't just like put in public infrastructure without indicating who ultimately is going to be responsible for it.
I understand.
But if I understand from her presentation, the sidewalk as designed that was set forward was put back further on the private property, is that correct?
Yes, that was also kind of part of the reason why I was asking, because whether or not it's actually in that right-of-way that's either city or county right-of-way can make a difference later on.
Because normally the city would have to maintain it if it cracks or crumbles.
Usually that's the thought, but then there are some codes that do provide, and I think the Tarpon Code does provide that property owners are supposed to maintain the adjacent right-of-way. Usually that's like in the form of mowing or things like that, but sometimes in certain circumstances, particularly with industrial property, a lot of times too, you'll see that include the sidewalks as well.
So the applicant has expressed an interest into paying into the sidewalk fund. Is there some creative mechanism that we can utilize to just allow them to do that, and we don't have to talk about this anymore?
You can't make it a condition of granting the waiver. It either meets the criteria for the waiver or it doesn't.
Do we need to wait for Ally's findings?
So Rainville Road is identified on our maps as a county right-of-way. Obviously, Pinellas Ave is a state right-of-way. And then I'm gonna pull up the images for the drainage swales.
Madam Chairwoman,
I wonder if she's just pulling up something.
it's related.
Okay.
I think there's a picture here to answer one of the questions. If the swale goes down more, and this is a picture of a property further down, looks like it's not there, further in the packet.
So based off of, I'm looking at Google Street View right now. It does show, and I'm along the frontage of the subject property, there are drainage swales on both sides of the street. And then I'm just gonna keep going down. Here. It appears that it goes a majority of the length of Rainville Road.
Do we know whether or not there's a history of flooding in this area, or?
I'll defer to the applicant if he has some knowledge of that.
Does anyone else have any questions for Ms. Keen?
Yeah, I have one. Do we know, has there been any study, or do we know of any amounts of people that transverse that road now? Is there pedestrians using that road now at all?
Well, so a majority of the property or along Rainville Road are some industrial users, but it is kind of a collector road. It does connect to a main thoroughfare, which is Pinellas Ave, which goes right to town. That's why staff kind of wanted you to be aware of kind of the overall context, that it's probably not a route that pedestrians use now, but as the area starts to grow and redevelop in the future, it potentially could be.
You know, certainly an area of transition, and I think that's
Definitely.
one of the reasons in our criteria review, we're not supposed to take into account whether there's sidewalks there now or not.
Yeah, it wasn't my point was, what would people be using this sidewalk for to get to or from? Where would they be going to or coming from to use a
Pinellas
sidewalk if it
Avenue.
were there?
Pinellas Avenue.
Is there residential areas close by? There is? Okay.
It's a little hard to see up here, but, so subject property is here. Again, Rainville Road is really kind of a mixture of more non-residential uses, but then Drew Boulevard is this little strip here. It's unincorporated county. There's a couple pockets that have been annexed into the city recently. That's all residential here. There's residential development down here. You know, you can't necessarily say that there won't be residential redevelopment in the future. It may continue to be industrial, but that's just kind of, you know, just depends on how the city grows out in the future.
It's the cut through to Alt 19. Okay, if there are no other questions for Ms. Keen, like to call the applicant forward? Any presentation, and if you would state your name and address and that you've been sworn in for the record?
Sure. George Pappas, 2907 Narcissus Drive in Holiday, Florida, and I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
I represent Lucas and the owner of the property and the contractor.
And can you just speak into the mic
Sorry.
there, sir? That's okay. Thank you.
So like Ali was saying, and a lot of the questions that were asked, the retainage goes all the way across Rainville Road. There are no sidewalks in any other business. The church there's nothing there. The main issue is we do meet the criteria to have it waived. I do understand our developer that we hired at the beginning didn't check for this, and that is his mistake, our mistake for not catching it. But we have caught it, and we are trying to, it does impact the wetlands. And SwiftMud has approved it, but like, I'm sorry, what's your?
Good luck with that.
There's nowhere for them to walk, pedestrians. They're gonna walk from our sidewalk to our sidewalk. So what would the pedestrian do? Also, it's on our property, so it was who's taking liability if the pedestrian falls? And the other question was, is the city gonna maintain the sidewalk on our property? So that's a lot of the questions that I've been asking the city. And like I said, to Mr. Dabowski, we are willing to give into the trust fund, not contingent on the answer, but we are willing to do that.
Right. And do we need to defer until we get a rock-solid answer on who's responsible for this?
No, because that's not technically part of the criteria, but I think it might be something to look at in the future for the city as a whole, not for this board, in terms of how the ordinances are structured.
Thank you.
And for future development, I mean, I don't see the church, Irish Church, leaving anytime soon. And they're gonna run into the same difficulties with the swale and the county. Installing the sidewalk is the difficulty. And the boardwalk. The boardwalk is a very difficult animal in itself and there's trees in the way, in the wetlands, and we're not allowed to work in the wetlands, so we're not allowed to remove the trees. So how are we putting the boardwalk in if we can't remove the trees that are in the wetlands?
I see
I
it even
understand it's
worse,
been
Ally,
approved,
if there's a
but-
boardwalk in the wetlands, it may attract people to start walking on it. I mean, it's sort of like an attraction, and that's another
There's nowhere for them to-
complicating factor.
The problem is when they get to the west side of the property, they have to jump over the swale. They can't go anywhere because there's no sidewalk to the adjacent property. So they would have to jump over the swale, same as North Pinellas Avenue, there's no sidewalk. there's a swale.
If I may ask, what was that mistake that you were referring to? Was that including the sidewalk in your original plans?
Yes, the developer obviously didn't research it properly. And, I mean, we can't be perfect either, but it is his job, but it's also, that's why there's the ordinance and we're trying to get a waiver, but
Gotcha.
it just doesn't, it's a really high cost and an additional for the public, the pedestrians, and like I said, the liability, who's liable for the pedestrian that falls,
Gina?
getting sued?
Regina, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
If they had put this in the correct way, knowing that this would have been a liable or a permittable variance, would we be here right now?
Yes.
Yeah, they would have had to have come either at the time they did their site plan application or now. Now they're kind of coming after the fact.
Okay.
If they had done it when they originally put the application through, then they would have come to this board before going through the site plan approval process.
Okay, thank you.
Right. But would it have been approved then? Because we meet the criteria?
It doesn't, honestly, the way that the statute, or the ordinance is written, it doesn't really matter if you came before or after. The criteria is the same at this
Right.
point in the game. It's just that you already have a site plan approval that does include the sidewalk.
Right, but we could also, I mean, we can do a revision where we can take that out, because we do meet the criteria to be approved for the waiver,
Right.
according to the ordinance.
And I don't know, under the code, would that constitute them having to go through the site plan process again, or is that not a material change under the code?
I would say because they went through a body that made a decision based off criteria to remove it, I think they would have to amend their permit applications to reflect the change. I don't necessarily believe it would trigger them to go back through the full site plan process,
Okay.
no.
Okay,
Because it doesn't necessarily impact the overall layout or anything else on the property.
okay. Just, so they would just have to redo the permits?
I believe so.
If there were a way for them to pay into the fund, what would the typical amount be for a project like this versus if they had that as an option, what would they normally pay to the fund?
I think I was told around $39 a linear foot, or 20, somewhere around there.
It's probably based on what it would cost to
To
install
actually
it.
do
I'm just reading the code.
Please.
See if it's specified. It might be within a different section. But typically, what I'll say with the pay in lieu fee, it's really at the discretion of our public works department, whether or not to state that they meet the standards to contribute to the sidewalk fee. In this case, I don't believe that was requested from them. I don't know if our public works department would have approved in lieu fee, but typically they would have.
Can you
have to do that
explain the
separately.
standard process that would allow for that to happen if we can't do it here?
Right, so. All right, so it states here that the decision of whether the construction of a sidewalk on a parcel is not practical shall be made by the Development Services Director or his or her designee. In making such a decision, the director, his or her designee, shall consider the following factors. One would be whether there is no existing sidewalk to which the proposed sidewalk can connect, and it is unlikely that there will be additional development nearby which will require the construction of additional sidewalks, essentially in the future. So that's how they make the determination. In the review of this, it was determined that, there is a lot of unknown about this area of whether or not, so I don't know if there was a decision made about that, but the application was for the sidewalk waiver, so that's why it's through this process. And then I was looking at the fee. It says the fee is determined by multiplying the linear feet of the parcel's street frontage, minus anything that's a driveway, times the per linear foot contribution fee that's established in another section. Let's see if it tells me. I don't think it has I don't know if you're seeing it, Regina.
So I'm looking at 132.03 where it talks about the sidewalk trust funds, that second thing where it says that the fee is established biennially by the Board of Commissioners resolution. The fee shall be set per linear foot, and shall be calculated as 1.25 times the average of the city's sidewalk construction costs, including labor, on a per linear foot basis.
It provides the calculation, but not the actual number that you have to
Correct.
multiply.
Yeah.
That would be something we'd have in the building department.
I see. So is it more or less?
Oh, I couldn't answer that.
It's
Typically,
more,
Yeah.
it would cost them more to buy it, to opt out.
that's the point, yeah.
Yes.
They charge that 1.2
Yeah, it's a penalty.
higher,
Right.
yeah.
I do, I know you had mentioned, you know, the street, not further development, but I do know that church large property has changed hands over Tarpon history, and, you know, with the passing of the pastor, you know, and the family, ultimately, they may decide to sell and develop that large property. I mean, that's a reality. And one of the things for us as a board is like, we can't know what that section of Tarpon is gonna look like in 15, 20 years. But the wetlands certainly are something, you know, that we care about and is part of our consideration. But you may be owning, in your family or who you're representing may be having that business next to a large, you know, apartment complex.
Sure.
So, anybody else have any questions for the?
Yeah, I have a couple of them, actually. The type of facility that you're going to be putting in, is that more of an upscale facility, not upscale facility?
It's an upscale RV storage, yes.
More upscale? Because I was just thinking of the aesthetics of, you know, you attracting business. Mr. Habrowski's point of the boardwalk was well taken, that the aesthetics might actually help you down the road. Also, can you describe to me or to us the process of building? Do many big trees have to come out to do it, or is it just shrubs that have to come out? Do concrete footings have to be put in, or, you know, I don't know the process of doing the boardwalk and or the, you know, sidewalk part.
This boardwalk is very difficult because of the wetlands. There's multiple palm trees that have to be removed. And the process with this boardwalk, being that it's in the wetlands, it has to go from 5 foot to 8 foot to begin with, because the front portion of it is not in the wetlands. So they're gonna have to build that and actually put the machine, the excavator, on top of the boardwalk to build the rest of the boardwalk and drive the piles into the wetlands, because we cannot put the machine in the wetlands to tear up the wetlands. That's why this doesn't really make too much sense.
So you
If we're
use
protecting
wood pilings to hold the boardwalk up, not concrete footings or anything?
Correct.
Okay. So how many larger trees do you think would have to come out?
If you bring back one of the pictures, probably 10, 15. All those palm trees, most of those,
Sorry.
On there. So you're saying basically all those are going to have to come out?
at least the kind, I think there's 5 there. Those 5 there. I'd have to double check. We've got the survey out there to see how it lines up, but definitely the first 3, and all of that shrubbery.
Okay. Yeah, the shrubs I think will grow back. The palm trees are the
Problem is,
issue.
how do we remove it if we cannot put a machine in the wetland?
Yeah, I don't know the construction. I'm not a construction
Well,
person. I don't know the process. I was asking, what is the process of?
You'd have to, there's no way to get the tree out. Unless
So you
do it
can't.
by-
Yeah. So you couldn't work
Unless
from the road over the swale. You actually have to get in there.
That's the other problem, is the swale's in the way, and that's the easement. So now that's why I guess the Board of Commissioners and the developer pushed it onto our property,
Were there?
because there's nowhere to put the sidewalk.
Were there many large trees and things you had to remove on the rest of the property already?
Yes, we paid quite a bit to remove them, and then we have to pay quite a bit to put them back in.
So quite a bit of so many trees have already been removed to
Yes.
make room for the storage facility?
We were charged $50,000 to remove the trees, and we have to put over 600 more trees back in, and 3,000 wetland mitigation plants that we have to pay environmentalists to maintain it for 5 years. There's quite a bit of cost in this project.
Okay. And then I guess my last comment is about the liability. I'm from up north, and up north, when we had to do our sidewalks were on the right of way, but if we didn't shovel our snow, we were responsible. So I'm guessing you're responsible whether it's on the right of way or not. I don't know, because that's a legal question, but common sense would be that if, we have to construct it and it's already been through the process, probably wherever you put it, you're gonna be responsible if somebody falls on it, would be my guess. And I just think that if you're gonna have an upscale facility, I know it's a big problem to put it in, but you've already removed a lot of trees, so the 5 that are there may not be that monumental compared to what's already been done. And the aesthetics may actually help if you have an upscale facility, the aesthetics may help. So I know it's a tough one.
The practicality of it, of the pedestrian, there's nothing to attract them to. They can't walk anywhere. They stop.
I have some personal experience, but I have been down that road several times, actually more than several times. And I have seen teenagers on that road more than a couple of times. So that's why I was asking, is there residential in the area? I mean, I don't know the area that well, but I've seen teens on that road, and it is a bit problematic because it's not that wide of a road. And if more residential is going to go in there, I know it's hard being the first one, if you have to do a sidewalk, it's like nobody else has one, but somebody's got to be first, or, to put them in. So I have seen teenagers on several occasions on that road, so I think there is probably some residential in the area.
Sure. But I think the question is mine is that we meet the criteria, so we should be approved. There's nothing in the ordinance says that even we got it approved in 2020, in 2023, it doesn't say anything that we cannot get it waived if we meet the criteria. So I think that's the most important question, is we meet the criteria to be it waived, so we should be approved. It shouldn't be aesthetics, it shouldn't be future development. We meet those criteria, and the ordinance does not say anything if it can go retro, if it was already approved. It doesn't state that. It states if we meet the criteria, we can be waived. Correct?
I mean, I tend to agree with you as far as these two criteria. Conditions or special circumstances peculiar to the property have not been self-created or have resulted from an action by the applicant with prior knowledge or approval of the applicant. And also the need for the requested variance arises out of the physical surrounding shape, topographical conditions, or other physical environmental conditions that are unique to the specific property involved, do not apply generally to property located in the same zoning district. And furthermore, the destruction that would have to be done to the wetlands to try to avoid destroying the wetlands doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
Right.
It's a sidewalk to nowhere. Normally, any developer say you have to put the sidewalk in, no matter whether there are other properties nearby or not, because someday somebody will build something and then it's gonna have to be addressed at some point. That's why I had hoped you could just put money in the fund and kick the can down the road, and then somebody else will pay for that whenever they figure out how to do it. But I'm leaning towards granting this sidewalk waiver myself.
Right, and then it's just a question for the city attorney to figure out, what goes first, the chicken or egg, when, like you said, the plans have already been through this process. We're not usually in this situation. Normally, we see it on the front end.
Right.
So that's for the city attorney to figure out how to navigate that forward if we approve a waiver tonight.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, this criteria is different, unlike our normal criteria says you have to meet all of them. This type of criteria is not like that, correct?
That's correct. And the way the ordinance reads, they only have to meet one of those four.
They only have to meet one in order to in order to approve the,
Pretty sure you got that.
I have a follow-up question.
yes, sir?
The construction process for the wetlands, in your opinion, I know you don't know until you do it, but in your opinion, will it do irreparable harm to the wetlands, like permanent harm to the wetlands, or would the construction be done and then the wetlands would be the same as it was afterwards?
I think, I can't answer that. We'd have to give the consultant, the environmental consultant, to see how much damage it would cause, if it would be permanent or just sacrificial for a year or two. I wouldn't know that, you know.
Is it likely that there would be permanent damage?
I would think the machines are pretty heavy and the turning would it would uproot the actual shrubage or wetland.
So you're using a machinery that has
Well,
the
Swift
treads?
Yeah, it's an excavator that has 2 tracks and they have to grab it and drive piles. So when they turn and everything, it would tear the bushes and the marsh or the mud.
Okay.
But Swift Mud already approved it, so they would be the agency that determines whether or not there would be irreparable harm
Right.
to the wetlands, and they were the ones who approved the plan that was submitted to the, so they went through that process to see if that boardwalk would meet Swift Mud's
But
okay. and
I
if
think
it-
at the time of the approval, there wasn't a design. We haven't even submitted the design yet.
Yeah, Swift Mud will rubber stamp anything gets in front of them, so.
Yeah.
Anybody out there want to build something, go to Swift Mud, they'll let you.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, hearing none, thank you, sir,
Thank you.
for presenting. Anyone from the public wish to address this issue? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address and that you've been sworn.
My name is Jeff Zalmanoff. I live at 1461 North River Circle. I have been sworn. And we live in a new development. It's called Riverbend Village. We use this road every day to come and go from our house. The Anclot Road that we have now runs along Captain Jack's. I'm sure you're familiar, they're gonna do sidewalks and everything on that supposedly. That road is quite a mess. We prefer this road. And when that road's under construction, this will be the main road to use. Where we live, there's 54 lots. Probably 20 of the residents ride bikes. And most of us go up and down Rainville Road. And then there's Tarpon Key next to us that has a lot of residents. They walk and ride bikes. They use this road. And then right at the end of Rainsville Road where it takes a left, there's probably about 15 or 20 duplexes with lots of families and kids, and they come up and down the road. And then all the people, not all the people, but some people that live in that, work in those, the boat place and all the industrial things back there, they ride bikes and walk to work on that road. So there's a lot of traffic on that road with people and bikes. It's a very narrow road and it's in very bad shape. There's nowhere to go when you're riding a bike to get out of the way. Now we're talking about putting a boat yard and an RV yard in. Boat trailers are 102 inches wide. They take the whole road plus. RVs are very big. We're talking about putting a lot of big, heavy vehicles up and down that road, and there's nowhere to go if you're a pedestrian or bicyclist. I know there's no sidewalk on this road yet, but this will be the start. And there's a lot of people that use it. A lot of people live back there. And it's a good A to B route to Pinellas. They're talking about the sidewalk doesn't have an end there. You have to just jump into the edge. Well, that's a design fault. They should put a little piece on the end when you have that map up there. And as far as the wetlands, I mean, they've been digging that place up for a year. Like they said, they've removed hundreds of trees. Now, I do see those palm trees, but how would you remove them? Well, it'd be really simple. You have a crane on the edge of the road and they pull them out. They don't have to drive a tractor or a track hoe in there. They do this stuff all the time. The land's perfectly flat. It wouldn't be that hard to do. Would it be more expensive than just throwing concrete down? Yes. But is it impossible? I don't think so. There's so many places we go to the state parks where they build these wooden bridges over it so you can see the wetlands. We have like 10 parks in Pinellas County like that already. So I don't see the damage results. I think that's an exaggeration. We have cranes. We're not talking about going 40, 50 feet off the road. You know, they use cranes all the time for reaching out and doing stuff. So I don't think that's practical. It's too hard to do. It may be expensive, I agree, but we need a sidewalk somewhere to start there. There's no safe way to go anywhere. A lot of people who live in our neighborhoods, they like to go to the Pinellas Trail. So we go up that Rainville Road, and there's a sidewalk in front of the church. You can go all the way past Captain Jack's and get on the side of the bridge and go across the bridge into Tarpon, and then you take a left, you go by the dog park, and you go straight to the Pinellas Trail. So it is a very well-used area. People are trying not to realize it is, but it's a lot of public traffic on that. Cars, bicyclists, people. We see people skateboarding on the road. I don't know how it's so rough, but they do. And a lot of people walk and ride their bikes back and forth to work. So I think it's a very important thing to have. I was surprised to see them wanting to do a variance of it, because we just moved into a new development, and part of our cost for that lot and that house was the sidewalks, the drains, everything. So, I saw this, I was like, wow, that's, why? Because if they do it, the next one's gonna need to do it. We need to improve that area. There's not that many ways around. We wanna improve the trails, access to the bike trails, safety of people. Like if you get a flat tire on it now, where do you go? You gotta be on the road. We see people on the road changing their tire. I know the sidewalk's only half the length of that road, because that's a big property. It's about half the length. So that would be something. That'd give you an escape off the road at least. So I think it's a well-needed thing. I understand there's criterias and they don't want to do it and this and that, but what's it gonna do to that road to have all these huge boats and RVs going up and down it? It's a very narrow road, and there is a ditch on each side. There's nowhere to go. And it's our common road that we use every day. We used it to get here today. So I would like to see the sidewalk put in. There's a lot of people who live back there. I don't know if you're well of all the developments. You have Riverbend Village, is 54 homes. You have Tarpon Key. I think there's about 50, 60 homes there. Before you get there, the road right off of Rainville, I forgot the name, there's probably about 30 duplexes. Lots of little kids and all people of all ages. And they ride bikes, they walk, they go back and forth. And like you said, there's 2 churches on that road. A lot of people there too. And then you have the boat club has that fenced-in area where they do the boat setups. But yeah, there's gonna be more places. Like you said, some of these places are gonna go away and they're gonna be apartment buildings, just like the rest of the state. It's just a matter of time. And I think kicking the can down the road's a mistake. I think we should start now and move forward and get this done and try to convince the next person to do it, or, And there should be a connector. If you put that map back up on there with the fence. You see at the end here where it's left, where he says you'll have to jump across? That's true, but that should be revised. There should be a little piece right there to the road. It's only common sense. And if the city or county needs to get involved in that, I think they should. I know there's a gully there and he has to do that little bit there, but I mean, that's a long stretch. Do you know what the lineal distance is on that? Is that 800 feet, 1,500 feet? It's a long road, long distance.
Read it, it's too small.
I'm just saying, we were trying to ride our bikes up Anclot Road, and people really speeding on that road, and it goes like this. It's narrow too. And this is a better route. It's a little safer to ride your bike. But, it's gonna get worse when you have boats and RV trailers all the time, pulling in and out of there. I'm gonna guess they're gonna have to have a really wide driveway entrance to do that, because it's a narrow road. Some of those motorhomes are 35 feet long, boat trailers, et cetera.
And I did just do a rough measurement from Pinellas Ave to the end of Rainville Road is just about a quarter mile in length.
So we're
that
talking
stretch.
like 1,300 feet, 1,300 something feet.
Right.
And the rest of the road that's the bigger section on that road. Because after their property, you have the church and then the boatyard, then there's the stop sign there.
Mm-hmm.
So that would cover 2/3 of that road with a sidewalk, which is a good start.
Okay, thank you, sir, for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to make a public comment, either for or against this application? Hearing none, any of the board?
I have a question, comment, probably for legal. The gentleman made a good point about the bicycles and the pedestrians, and that, you know, enlightened us as to how many people are in the area. But from my understanding is you're not allowed to ride bicycles on the sidewalk, are you here?
That's not part of the criteria that is in the code. So whether or not people do or do not ride bikes, that's not actually part of the listed criteria. It's sort of extraneous information in this respect. Bicycles are technically supposed to share the road with vehicles. They're considered to be like a vehicle and to ride like on that right corner. You know, and when you look at where that swale is, that swale, regardless of whether or not the sidewalks go in, that swale is still gonna be there. You know, and there's no improvements that are going to be made directly to that roadway.
So
That's not part of this at all.
So if you were on a bicycle and you saw something coming out, you need to get off, you'd have to get on that sidewalk at one end or the other. You wouldn't be able to get on in the middle?
Correct. Because that swale is gonna be there and it's gonna be on the other side of the swale, based on what I see. Is that correct, Ally?
Correct.
Yes.
I have a question about, does the county own Rainville Road, or is that a city road?
Shows Rainville Road as a county roadway.
And are there procedures for having them putting in a shoulder, for instance, or a bike lane, for instance, where the county could actually widen the road?
So they have, similar to what they're doing along Anclote Road, they go through processes of roadway improvements. They have a capital improvements program, just like we do, that basically prioritizes different projects. I would assume that any sort of improvements, unless there was an immediate safety need, I would assume they'd have to follow their capital improvements program. I don't know if Rainville Road is on any sort of list, but that would technically be the way that they would have to approach it.
Okay, so the priority would have to be raised. And just to be clear, we can't consider financial issues, whether it's going to cost this person or the developer a lot of money or not. We're not allowed to consider that. But I wouldn't care. If it cost them $1 million, right, I would say put it in if I thought it made sense. Or $1 million into the sidewalk fund if you don't want it. But somehow that procedure, we're not allowed to even get them to put in $1 for sure. So that changes things here. But what doesn't change, I guess, is the fact that it appears to me that they meet at least one, if not two, of the 4 criteria. I feel like I'm stuck. You know, I don't know what else to say.
Did you meet the 2 criteria?
I mean, what else can we do but approve it? I don't know, unless anybody can say otherwise or convince me that, because I mean, that you make a compelling argument. I mean, but again, I think that's gonna be something for the county, because human safety, of course. I mean, we need to consider that. And again, somebody needs to start putting in sidewalks somewhere, someday, but
I'm sorry, you can't ask questions from the audience.
But I'm happy to because they meet the criteria, and that's what we're bound by. But other than that, I mean, it just, on its face, this thing is very complex, very complicated, but they meet the criteria as far as I can tell. I just hope that they do kick in some money to the fund anyways. But unless somebody else can convince me otherwise, that's where.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the waiver.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, call for a roll call.
Mr. Wood?
Approved.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Mr. Hrabowski?
Yes.
Ms. Rich?
Yes. Thank you. The next application before us tonight is application 23-80, variance to reduce the required side yard setback for the purpose of constructing a new storage shed. The address is 1248 North Florida Avenue. If we could have Ms. Keen from the city present.
Yes. Okay, the subject property is outlined in red here on the screen. It's off of North Florida Avenue. All of the property and surrounding area is zoned R100, which is a single-family residential zoning district. The application is to allow a reduced side yard setback for a new 12 by 16 or 192 square foot storage shed to be installed on the property. The applicant is proposing a side yard setback of 5 feet where they would be typically required a minimum setback of 5 feet from, they're requesting a 0-foot setback, typically required a 5-foot side setback. The Land Development Code does have some specific requirements for storage sheds that are less than 200 square feet, which is what is being proposed. It does allow for reduced side and rear setbacks of 5 feet, and again, they're proposing a side yard of 0 feet. The proposed shed is shown here in blue on the screen, bumped up right up to an existing 6-foot privacy fence that surrounds the entire rear yard of the property, shown in orange. The applicant did provide some information about some limitations on the property. One being that the property or the existing home is fairly set back from the road. It's almost 80 feet from the frontage, so it has a smaller rear yard. A majority of the rear yard is enclosed with a pool screen enclosure and a swimming pool. The north side of the yard has some existing trees providing some limitations to locating a shed. And then on the south side, they've indicated that there are some brick sidewalls or walkways, as well as some existing trees that I've shown here in green that kind of limit their potential location. One thing that staff had noted is that the existing home is set back from the south side property line about 25 feet. They're proposing the shed to be 12 feet in width, so it does allow for about 13 feet between the wall of the home and the property line to place that structure. So there is some flexibility in the location of it from staff's perspective. These are some images provided by the applicant. This is looking towards the street. This is the proposed location of the shed. You can see that existing walkway. The entry to the screen enclosure is over here, and some of the existing trees and foliage on the property that kind of limit where he can place the shed. This is looking the opposite direction towards the back of the property. Again, the brick walkway and some existing trees. This is looking at the north side yard on the opposite side as some of the existing trees, and there's a brick walkway as well. These are your variance criteria, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for staff tonight?
Just briefly, your credentials are on file with the city, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you're entering your file in the city's file on this matter for the board's consideration as evidence, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions for Ms. Keen, do we have the applicant present tonight? Yes. If you'd please state your name and address and then anything you'd like to present us with.
Robert Scott Kelly, 1248 North Florida Avenue, and I've been sworn.
Thank you.
There are a lot of deficiencies. If you can go back, can you show them the shed on the other side of the fence?
Referring to this one right here?
Yes.
Okay.
There are quite a few pictures, but I guess,
Yeah,
you
they're all
gotta draw the
included,
line
all the
somewhere.
pictures are included in your packets.
Yeah, we have a
Right.
large stack of photos.
Right. I originally wanted to have it up against the fence because a prior shed, we have, surprisingly, looking at that picture, you've got the river. It's not a really rural area. It was probably 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, but there's been so much building. We got raccoons, we got possums, armadillos, tortoises. And what I wanted to do was have it up against the fence. There will be sufficient areas. As a matter of fact, Ellie and I had a conversation. The fence is fairly new, and there are all kinds of different areas where the animals travel through the yard. I love animals. I have no objection to them even nesting but I do not want to get in the same situation that I was in before, where the shed and the fence created an area that basically was not able to be maintained. And there's, hopefully, I don't know, Ally, did everybody get the sheet?
Yes.
I went out, I made extensive measurements. The blue paper is actually the 12 by 16 shed. And it took me quite a while to find graph paper, but I made extensive measurements, and that's really the only area that it can go. There really is no other area. So I have the double-edged sword there. We have the animals. I've got part of my front yard that, do you have an aerial view? That I purposely leave because the animals have to live somewhere. Oh, well, okay.
It's a little far away.
Yeah. Well, the site.
Which was
yeah.
a large front yard here.
Yeah, if you, just on the other side of the driveway, I've got bushes and it's like a little refuge, if you'll excuse the expression. So I know there are quite a few animals that live there, and I don't mind them passing through. I don't mind if they nest. I just would prefer it not being, as I said, the same situation I experienced with the other shed. So if it goes up against the fence, and then again, my neighbor, he's got a shed that's right up against the fence. Neighbor behind me should have gone a variance, and that's one of the pictures that unfortunately we don't have. His screen enclosure is directly against my fence. I'm not here to create difficulties for anyone. I'm just looking at A, the animals, and B, I really don't have anywhere else to put it.
Thank you. Just in reference to what you were saying about the blue card, it's the exact measurements with
That
the...
represents 12 by 16.
Right, and
So
is this a prefab shed
It's a
or?
tough shed. Tough shed.
Tough shed? Is that
Yeah,
what you
so
said?
it's being constructed, I don't know, it's kind of a hybrid.
Do they
it's-
come in other smaller measurements, or this was?
Any smaller and it wouldn't really be practical for what I'm attempting. I've got a storage unit right now that's about that size. And I've got stuff in my garage that I need to move into the shed.
Right.
Got projects everywhere, but that's kind of a way of life for some people.
Anyone have any further questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You said your neighbor has a shed up against the other side of the fence now?
Yes,
So that's a shed right there?
a shed.
And that,
Yeah, I've got better pictures.
that's okay.
We
That-
have other pictures in our.
And that's
Oh,
right up
okay.
against the fence on the other side?
That is right up against the fence.
Okay, and then
Okay.
the other thing I have is just a comment. I know you were saying that the wildlife would be problematic if you left the space. I was kind of thinking it would be problematic the other way. If something got in and burrowed down in there between or underneath the fence, you couldn't address it unless you moved your shed then.
Well, Tough Shed actually provides a product that has a floor. Mine is actually, I'm gonna have somebody come in and pour a slab. So it's gonna be actually something I'm sure the person that's pouring the shed is not with Tough Shed. Once the slab is poured, cured, then Tough Shed is gonna come in and put the shed on top of the slab.
So nothing can burrow under
So
there.
nothing can burrow
So you're-
underneath and.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any, and thank you for all the photos you did submit. We got a whole stack of
Okay.
photos in color. Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant tonight? No?
Is there a safety concern that we have a rule of 5 feet away from somebody's property?
I don't think it's necessarily a safety issue. We typically have a setback requirement for most structures, in this case for sheds in this zoning district, that are less than 200 square feet. It's 5 feet is the minimum.
And the fence, is that your fence or the neighbor's fence?
My fence.
Your fence, and was it properly permitted, the fence?
Yes, it was. Actually, the final inspection has not been done yet, but yes.
Because normally the fence itself is not right on the property line, is that correct, Ally?
Fences can be right on the property line.
But
Yes.
is yours right on the property line, or?
I don't know to what extent there's an offset. The vinyl fences are actually, well, you know what, I don't know. The wooden fences and vinyl fences, I don't know whether there's a variation in the thickness, but it is basically along the property line.
Okay, thank you.
I would say typically, they're along property lines. Some people will leave a little bit of space just to fully put it on their property, but I would say a majority of the fences that we review are on the property lines.
And the main issue, as this gentleman was bringing up on the board, is not safety to have it along the fence line, to have no setback. That's not a safety issue. And therefore, there's no safety issue with his neighbors having them up against his fence. It's more, what, runoff or something like that?
Typically, it's just to provide separation between properties, to provide proper areas for maintenance of any sort of structures. Those are the usual reasons for setbacks. In some
So no
cases,
harm,
yes,
no
safety
foul,
could be.
pretty much, since he has neighbors who've already done it. He's trying to do it the right way. They did not. I see no reason to punish this man for, we didn't
I
ask.
haven't seen, is anybody here opposed to
Yeah,
this?
right.
I'm sorry.
Is anyone here opposed to this?
We haven't yet called for public comment, so I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, were there letters or any
We did not
emails?
receive any written letters or emails, but we did send out the notifications
Okay.
and post the property.
Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant before we go to public comment? Okay, thank you, sir, for coming and submitting everything. Are there any members of the public who'd wish to address this application tonight? No. Seeing none? Okay. Any further discussion by the board tonight? Hearing no more further discussion, would someone like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second? Okay. We have a motion to approve a waiver for 1248 North Florida Avenue for variance to reduce the required side yard setback for the purpose of constructing a new storage shed. It's been motion made and seconded. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Ms. Simon?
No.
Mr. Herbowski?
Yes.
And Ms. Rich?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have no further applications tonight. Staff prepared to make any comments?
I do not have anything. I want to, again, welcome Mr. Wood to the board, and he got to participate in his very first meeting, so congratulations. We finally have a full board, and I know Mr. Obrowski always threatens that he's leaving in October, and maybe he is, we don't know. But so we're happy to have everyone on board, and we appreciate your participation. I also want to thank Paige Tillison. She's filling in for Kim tonight. You might see here the next couple meetings, Kim is taking a class, so Paige will be filling in and helping us out. Other than that, I don't have any other comments.
And Jackie sent regrets,
Yes.
but I believe she submitted a new email with our clerk, so we just need to make sure that gets
Okay.
carried out.
Okay, I believe that Kim spoke with her this afternoon, so she hopefully let her know that. We have a different email address.
Do we have a meeting next month?
We sure do.
We do, okay.
Yeah.
September, I will see you all there.
Any other board comments? Hearing none, I adjourn the meeting of the Board of Adjustments, 7:33 PM.